Okay, the message today was not what I was going to do. I was just going to go on with our thing with Micah. But the message today is, I'm God commissioned. And I know I was supposed to do something, and I was supposed to do something in Galatians, and I'm killing a little bit of time while the tablet starts up so I can start that recording at the same time. But that is what we're going to talk about. We're just going to start in Galatians, and we're going to do Galatians chapter 1. And I'm reading from the Message Bible, which I'm really surprised everybody in the room did not just sit up and look at me when I said that, because it's not a translation that I typically preach from. I do use it in my writing sometimes. It's grown on me. I was very anti-Message at one point in time, and very against it, and then Yolanda wanted a Message Bible, and so I bought Apostle Yolanda a Message Bible for her birthday one year, because I got a good deal on it, and from there, we kind of went on, and I gave it more of a chance, and it's grown on me. It's not probably my favorite translation in the entire world, but it has grown on me. And so for that, I'm very, very grateful, because we don't want to miss what God has to say to us anywhere, do we? Okay. All right, we are rolling now. So I'm God commissioned. So even though this is not what I originally planned on preaching on this morning, it's really hot out, and I'm supposed to be recording today for radio, and they want something live because they like me better live than when I sit on the floor, and I don't really blame them in that. And we know that that's how I do the best, and so I changed the message. So let's talk about being God commissioned, because I am at the end of one season and the beginning of another, and I've known that since May 13th. Let's let the record show, even though I might not have told everybody and put it all over the internet and gone running my mouth like everybody usually does when something happens. I know I'm at the end of one thing and that something new is coming, but as I stand here, I can't believe how different things are from May 13th until now. How much things started, and I'll never forget the story. I was sitting downstairs in this building, in my office, at my desk, thinking about what I wanted to talk about if some people didn't show up at the service, if we didn't have our normal crowd on a Sunday morning. Was I going to do what I was regularly scheduled to do, or was I going to do something different? It was a Friday. I didn't have much else to do. I didn't know what else I was going to do. And so I already had something in place, but I was trying to think about whether or not I wanted to do something a little bit different. And so God told me that day I was moving. And we're not going to get into where. I'm going to get a bunch of inboxes wanting to know where, but I'm not telling y'all. If I've told you, then you need to know. If I haven't told you, then you don't. And it's that simple. But that there are a whole bunch of things that have come down since then. We've got ministry reorganization. We've got all of our websites have been redone, except for one which is still in process, which will probably be done in the next couple of weeks. You know, except for one business, everything else has been done. I've got another book now in progress. I've got a book that's been released. I've got another one about to be released. I've got one that's basically kind of a ministry anthology. There have been business changes and attendance changes and some church changes, and in the middle of all this shake-up stuff, God gave me Galatians and told me to go look at it in the Message Bible, and now I know why. Because I'm God commissioned, and that's exactly the term that it uses in the Message Bible. And so let's look at Galatians chapter 1, and I'm going to read through verse 5, and this is in the Message Bible. I, Paul, and my companions in faith here send greetings to the Galatian churches. My authority for writing to you does not come from any popular vote of the people. Isn't that a poignant statement this week? As everybody fights over candidates, he's not here because he got voted in, nor does it come through the appointment of some human higher up. It comes directly from Jesus the Messiah and God the Father who raised him from the dead. I'm God commissioned. So I greet you with the words, grace and peace. We know the meaning of those words because Jesus Christ rescued us from this evil world we're in by offering himself as a sacrifice for our sins. God's plan is that we all experience that rescue. Glory to God forever. Oh yes. You know, we like to throw around a lot of terms. We like to throw around, oh, touch not my anointed on things like that in a fight to try and get people to back off or to make people think we're more important than we really are, or that saying that somehow proves something. But we forget that the reality is that we've got no power and no anointing, then people can touch us, they can slap us, they can lick the boogers out of our nose. Nothing is going to happen. Nothing is going to come out of that because they're not going to touch anything or affect anything out of us. They're not going to pull any power if we don't have any power. But here in Galatians, the Apostle Paul brings something else to the table. He's not saying, touch not my anointed. He's saying, I am God commissioned. He's saying, that means no matter who tries to touch him, no matter who tries to take from him, no matter who tries to do what, no matter who tries to do this, no matter who tries to do that, nobody can change or take away that he's been sent and established there by God. Because he's not there by a vote, which means you can't be voted out. He's not there by a human appointment, which means he's not going to be replaced. But he's God commissioned. And so that's something that we have to keep in mind. We're either God commissioned or we aren't. And it's that simple. We can be as gifted as we think we are. We can think we're as cute as we want to. We can think we're as anointed as we want to. But if we aren't God commissioned, if we don't have the appointment and the purpose to be there, if we don't have the power to be there, then we're wasting our time. Then we are not doing what we're supposed to be doing because it's not God commissioned. So we can see all the different things that go into being God commissioned here in Galatians. And let's go verses 6 through 9. Verses 6 through 9 in chapter 1. I can't believe your fickleness, how easily you have turned traitor to him who called you by the grace of Christ by embracing a variant message. It is not a minor variation, you know, it is a completely other, an alien message, a known message, a lie about God. Pretty clear. That's why I love how all this stuff goes, and that's why I know I was supposed to use this, because it's really clear. Those who are provoking this agitation among you are turning the message of Christ on its head. Let me be blunt. If one of us, even if an angel from heaven, were to preach something other than what we preached originally, let him be cursed. I said it once, I'll say it again. If anyone, regardless of reputation or credentials, preaches something other than what you received originally, let him be cursed. So how did they do this, and how did this kind of play out? They're chasing after whatever they want to chase after. And we all get up here and we all start spouting out, oh, the Book of Mormon is false, and the Urantia book is false, and then this book is false, and all these counterfeit revelations are false, and all the stuff coming out of Korea is false. But we don't consider that even though all that may very well be true, and it certainly is true that they are counterfeit revelations, we keep forgetting the fact that we follow people every single day who are preaching a counterfeit gospel, who are not preaching the truth to us because they want us to feel a certain way or to evoke something within us so that we have a certain response to them. And we follow that, and we follow that in all kinds of different ways. If the second I get up here and I don't preach about prosperity, or I don't preach something that makes you feel good, that you're angry and you want to go find another church or you want to go find another program to watch, that tells me that you have already turned to an alternative gospel. Somebody who took the gospel and who turned it and who changed it into something else. And that's the counter of being God commissioned. If you're picking up this alternative gospel and you're running with it, then you're not commissioned by God, you're following man. You're following a human appointment. And while you may be popular for a little while, you may be prosperous for a little while, it might be comfortable for a little while, in the long run that's going to be shut down. I just read about one of them who wasn't real popular, but was more popular than most of us. And he got popular by preaching prosperity messages. In fact, he was called a prosperity prophet, and people followed him, and he had this big, huge, sprawling house somewhere on Long Island. I don't remember the city, but I do know it was on Long Island because I read the article, and how it's in foreclosure now. Why is it in foreclosure now? Because it wasn't of God. It was something that was counterfeit, and while it made people feel all right for a little while, they went to something else. And what we're doing in church today is we're going from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing, where basically everybody has the same alternative or counterfeit message, and they're not stepping back and realizing that they're not getting fed. And so, as a result, we're eating too much spiritual candy, which gives you spiritual diabetes, and too much spiritual dessert, which gives you spiritual diabetes. Or, you know, they're following after all these different things, these counterfeit gods, these counterfeit things, and maybe they're starving, and so you have spiritual anorexia. Or you're eating too much of the wrong thing, which will give you spiritual bulimia. Because then you're going to wind up eating too much and throwing it up. And so when we get into that place, it gets frustrating, because the Apostle Paul spoke from God. The Apostle Paul did not speak from human beings. He said that. That's a part of being God commissioned. It wasn't to win friends, it wasn't to influence people, but it was to convey the truth. And whenever people start to walk away from that, to get away from that, to take something else on, we need to realize that being God commissioned does not mean you are always going to be liked. You are not always going to get along well with everybody else. Now, that's not an excuse to be unkind. It's not an excuse to be rude. It's not an excuse to be unseemly. It is certainly a situation that merits the fact that sometimes there is conflict when the true gospel is preached. Because the gospel, as we're going to find out in a minute, is not just about feeling good. Verse 10 through 12. Do you think I speak this strongly in order to manipulate crowds or curry favor with God or get popular applause? If my goal was popularity, I wouldn't bother being Christ's slave. Know this, I am most emphatic here, friends. This great message I delivered to you is not mere human optimism. I didn't receive it through the traditions, and I wasn't taught it in some school. I got it straight from God, received the message directly from Jesus Christ. It's not a message of mere optimism. It's not something that is here to just make us feel good about ourselves. And the true God commission balances that out. It considers all those different things. It considers that the gospel is about the whole of our entire being. It's about when we feel good. It's about when we feel bad. It's about salvation from the beginning to the end. I've said it before that eternal life is eternal life. It's from now as much as it is after we die. And so when we get into the whole of embracing all that God has for us, and we get into a place where we're embracing the whole of the gospel, we need to be open to this concept that being commissioned by God is not about looking like and sounding like and acting like everybody else. But it's also not about following all the right rules and looking right and doing the same thing as everybody else. I think we have to have standards of conduct. I believe that we need to have standards of ethics. I believe that we need to be people that are obedient, that understand that we need to follow certain protocol and certain God-ordained order and all of those different things. But when it comes to looking like everybody else all the time and having the ministries that are just like everybody else's, we need to refrain from that. And we need to get away from that, because when we start getting into those traditions start to take place over what God has to say to us now. And if everybody's got a robe and a hat and a ring and a staff in order to prove something or to look something, that's a tradition. If everybody's got to have the same church that looks the same as everybody else, that does the same thing as everybody else, then they're doing that out of tradition. If you get caught up in all the church gossip, because that has become a tradition. We all watch Greenleaf. Nothing goes on in that church that everybody else doesn't know about. Then we're doing it out of tradition. Anything can be a tradition. We all look at the Catholic Church and go, oh, they got all these traditions, they got all these traditions. Well, they do have all those traditions. And you're right, those traditions aren't biblical. There's nothing wrong with saying that. But there is something wrong with saying it and not truly examining the fact that we have taken things on that are not God-commissioned, that God has not established for us to be doing, and that we're just doing them because we want to do them. Verses 13 through 16. I'm sure that you heard the story of my earlier life when I lived in the Jewish way. In those days, I went all out in persecuting God's church. I was systematically destroying it. I was so enthusiastic about the traditions of my ancestors that I had advanced head and shoulders above my peers in my career. Even then, God had his designs on me. Why? When I was still in my mother's womb, he chose and called me out of sheer generosity. Now he has intervened and revealed his Son to me so that I might joyfully tell non-Jews about him. So having a God commission means it's about going anywhere and everywhere that God sends, whenever, wherever, however. Go back to Jonah. Go back what we talked about when we did the study in Jonah a few weeks ago, about how Jonah told God where he was not going. Where God was not going to send him because he didn't like those people, because he didn't want to go there. And now, it's amazing how much of that still filters into the church today, because the reality is that we all got a little bit of Jonah in us, whether we want to do it or not, whether we want to deal with it or not. Jonah is still alive and well because we get it in our mind that we're not doing that. God's not going to ask me to do that. Well, that'll probably very much be the very exact thing that God asked you to do. Or not just ask you, go do it. And it says that Jonah just did whatever he wanted. La, 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 going on the little boat, going under the boat, going to sleep as the whole boat is about to fall apart, and he's the reason. But you can't say that your God commission didn't have that attitude. He was God commissioned, but he didn't want to do what he was told. And even when he did what he was told, he still had the wrong attitude about it. He was still sitting there, getting all cushy, waiting for the whole thing to explode in its face. It means that you don't always see those also do what you do. You may very well be in a position or in a situation where you're not always around everybody else and have that comfort and that convenience of being where everybody else is. Verses 16 through 20. Immediately after my calling, without consulting anyone around me and without going up to Jerusalem to confer with those who were apostles, long before I got away to Arabia. Later I returned to Damascus, but it was 3 years before I went up to Jerusalem to compare stories with Peter. I was there only 15 days, but what days they were. Except for our master's brother James, I saw no other apostles. I'm telling you the absolute truth in this. Verses 21 through 24. Then I began my ministry in the regions of Syria and Cilicia. After all that time and activity, I was still unknown by face among the Christian churches in Judea. There was only this report: that man who once persecuted us is now preaching the very message he used to try to destroy. Their response was to recognize and worship God because of me. Isn't that supposed to be the ultimate end or the ultimate purpose of the God Commission, is that people are supposed to find God because of us? That even though we might be unknown or we might be in places where everybody doesn't know our name, where it's not cheers, where it's not comfortable, where it's not where we're going, that everybody knows and comes and worships God because they know that God is in that place or with that person. You know, there was, I think I heard 15 years between his call and when he actually did anything in ministry. That in those 15 years, that from that Damascus experience to when he actually went on his first mission trip, there was 15 years in there. I know there could have been a lot of reasons for that, but that's a long time when you think about some of these people in church that, you know, now get baptized and then go to church and then a month later they're a bishop. I mean, not that that's God's way or how they're supposed to be doing it, but that is the actual thing that a lot of people are doing nowadays. But the Apostle Paul was in a place where he was separated. Even though there were other people and there were other apostles, and no, this is not an excuse for people to not go to church. Before I get messages on Facebook, that is not what this is about, and that's not what I'm saying. He still went to church and he was still connected to the body. He just wasn't doing ministry. You know, it is possible for us to go to church and not be in charge. Isn't that amazing? You know that just because you're called doesn't mean that you have to be the one in the pulpit all the time. But people don't realize that today, or they don't think about it, or they don't consider it or esteem it in the exact way that they should. But he was in a place where he was set apart in order to do this, because in order to be God commissioned, it takes some time. You may have a vision and you may have a purpose and you may have something, but it doesn't mean that you're actually where you're going to be at that moment forever. You know, I remember people saying, oh, well, where have you been or why aren't you on here? Well, I have been somewhere for all this time. I mean, I didn't just arrive. I didn't just wake up one morning and get saved 5 minutes ago and now I'm on the internet with a thing. I understand that a lot of people kind of take that route now, but that is certainly not necessarily what God's plan is for most people. But when we're God-purposed, we change. The Apostle Paul changed. He might have been somebody that came from Judaism, that came from that kind of place where he was under the law and he understood it, but he changed. And the apostles around him also changed when they got called. And when people heard of him and when people found out about him, they also changed. They came and they worshiped God because of him, because of his testimony, because of what he was doing, because of where he was. And imagine that this man who once persecuted us is now on our side. Think about that concept. You know, we talk about enemies. I can really say for a fact that I have not found most of my enemies to be like this. I have found most of them to be people who are in the church, who already think they know everything, or who already think that they're in a position where they should be elevated when they're not. I haven't found too many people who once persecuted us to now preach us to be persecutors, to be people that we need to watch for. Because we need to come to a certain realization of ourselves in order to accept being God commissioned. And we're not going to be able to do that unless we humble ourselves. Unless we lay ourselves down and we realize that we don't know everything. We aren't all knowing. We aren't all seeing. We don't get it right all the time. We're not perfect all the time. We're not comfortable all the time. But really come to the place where we can say, you know what, maybe I didn't persecute people. Maybe I didn't persecute the believers, but I didn't treat somebody the way I should have. Or I didn't do right by the leader I had. Or I didn't obey God the way I should have. I didn't do what God was telling me to do. Or I didn't keep my word. Or I didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't go leave my gift at the altar and go make something right. No, today we go to the altar and we go, I'm really waiting for that person to come to the altar and come and get me, and they better leave their gift and they better get over here because they wronged me, when we're the ones who need to go apologize. When we're the ones who did the wrong thing. Or we're the ones who didn't act properly. So if we really want to be God commissioned, we got to lay some of this stuff down, or we're not ever going to get to that point, because the ministry doesn't begin until we go through that process. And until we are willing and ready to do that, we're going to stay right where we are. Doesn't that sound like fun? And the answer is no. But we don't ever get into ministry for the right reason until we accept the point where we really hear about being God commissioned. And so, I'm God commissioned. We are here because we are God commissioned. And we are not going to get to the point where we're impacting other people's lives until we understand fully what that means.
Amen.
Mom, go turn off the camera.